Greetings and peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I have the honor and privilege of being joined by my brother Matt Douglas of the Fatimiyya Sufi Order, who returns to talk about the aspect of the Time Travel Education Center and why its science doesn't match up. So, without further ado, welcome, brother Matt Douglas. Nur alaikum, and thank you for being here.
Alaikum, Salman. We had originally planned to do a video coming up sometime in early June when you got blindsided by this slander from Dietrich and Moon.
Yes.
Um, I thought it'd help you out and push things up if you were
Thank you,
wondering. So
brother.
here I am. No problem, no problem. Now, for the record, just so anybody knows, I have never had any direct contact with either. Okay, so these are people I don't know. I just had some, a little bit of skepticism. Well, in some cases, a lot of skepticism about certain things. I even brought that to your attention, especially on Moon's end, a couple months back. Um, and let things play out, and well, then this happened. I was pretty surprised by it myself, even though I didn't know these people. I know these were people that you had built, relations with over a period of years,
Oh yes, I
and
always did right by them. I honestly believed their mission, and unfortunately, yeah, I got duped by them too because they do this to every person that's been on their team. They throw them under the bus, and the people, unfortunately, what they do is instead of investing any energy or fighting back against it, people quietly go away. But that's not fair what they do, and I was not going to allow them to do that to me.
oh, and there's no reason why you should, and it might just help the next person down the line.
Yes.
Um, for me, because I'll relate more than just debunking the, horseshit science of the whole time travel thing. Let me kind of just give what I saw unraveling, because I did listen to good chunks of a lot of the podcasts you did with them, and me being someone who's done it with you, I kind of, wanted to see, who the other folk were you were featuring that I didn't know. So I wanted to give a listen, even if some of them were pretty long. I won't say I got to all of it, but I'd say I got to a pretty good chunk that I have a pretty good idea of, what they were saying. And there were some, because there were some questionable things. Now, when I had heard some of their podcasts collectively, I was much more skeptical of Moon than of Dietrich.
Yes.
Um, Not so much in the sense of, because I wasn't necessarily seeing uh, them as cons at that point, and you were vouching for Dietrich, so I went along with it because you're my friend and comrade, and thought
Yes.
to me your brother. Um, and the way I saw it is here was Dietrich claiming to be a whistleblower,
Mm-hmm.
and I had some questionable science, which I'll get into in a little bit, but it was not the kind of thing where it's the kind of thing that he could have made an honest mistake on, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there were parts of it that were highly questionable. In particular, his claim about a neutron bomb creating zombies.
Yeah.
I'll break that down in just a little bit. But and I'm not an expert on nuclear physics, but I know enough that I can ask some questions that need answers that aren't provided. Put it that way.
Yes.
Whereas with Moon, because immediately when he started talking about time travel, that sent a red flag up, and I'll also get into why. Um, but it sent a red flag up. But when I watched his videos at the Time Travel Education Center that he has, that his little website he has set up explaining it, not only was the science bad, but it wasn't something that could be an honest mistake, and in fact involved considerable visual verbal sleight of hand to get you to buy his bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there's a whole lot else that I can go into on, like, from what I heard of the actual YouTube clip where they slander you. Not that I listened to the whole damn 12 hours. Thank you very much. But I wanted to listen to various chunks, to get an idea of just, okay, because I can help you as my brother best by finding out what the hell they are actually saying or not saying or whatever.
Yes.
So what I was kind of thinking when I put, okay, Dietrich's questionable science, but possibly an honest mistake, against Boone's complete bullshit and using using trickery and deceptive language to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
It would have seen, and here's Dietrich claiming to be a whistleblower. I would have drawn the conclusion, trying to still look in the best possible light, that perhaps Dietrich was a whistleblower and Moon was the person who kind of came in, pretended to help him out, but actually fed him a bunch of false information to discredit him.
Mm-hmm.
Now both are highly questionable.
Definitely.
Definitely. I mean, if I had just taken the podcast where they're slandering you, I would have almost thought as Dietrich as the handler. But given the bigger picture, I'd totally agree with you that Moon is more likely the handler. If there's a, kind of a handler Patsy kind of relationship going on.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
So here's let me break down a little bit of why I questioned Dietrich's science. There are other things I questioned about Dietrich, and frankly did have some that I don't know if they're true or not, but at least were pretty good and rang true. But there was this other stuff in it that, wait a minute, hold on. I'm not an expert on nuclear physics, but I'm not a total dunce. So his claim was that the neutrons in neutron bombs created, when they interacted with the human anatomy, they created prions in the brain, which were what you got with mad cow disease, and hence formed a zombie like shell of a person.
Right.
The problem with that is breaking down what the neutron bomb is first of all. Okay, the original nuclear bomb, like the Fat Man and Little Boy, the two that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, these were strictly fission bombs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fission is basically splitting an atom. You put two big enough chunks of uranium together, it will create a chain reaction, and a reaction out of control is an explosion, hence the nuclear explosion, which is neutrons being used as basically atomic bullets to split the nucleus of U-235, which splits into, I forget which two. I want to say one of them strontium-90. I forget what the other one is. I'm not looking at it. But it also, of course, releases 3 neutrons that then go and split other atoms, hence forming the chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other form of nuclear power is fusion. Now,
Right.
fusion has not been developed to the point of efficiency because fusion has never been developed as a chain reaction. Okay. So therefore, just the way you would not get any energy burning wood if you had to strike a match and then, stick it to a piece of wood and let that little bit smoke and keep doing that millions of times before the log was reduced to ash. You would not, you have to get the fire too light and it just burns the log on its own. Okay. So likewise, we have not found a way to make fusion and I don't know if they ever will, honestly. Kind of a scientific question mark to my best understanding right now, that in order to create a fusion reaction in a reactor where you can harness the power, you
Right.
need to put more in than you get out. Um, However, you can just take, because the fusion reaction is simply the fusing of the nucleus, which starts with, which occurs regularly in stars. Why they're hot. It's the state beyond gas called plasma, where, the initial reaction is hydrogen atoms fusing their nuclei, becoming helium, and then that forms into, what is it, boron, or et cetera, et cetera. Stars supposedly start burning out when they reach, get enough iron in their core. There's a lot of questions about that I have, but that's the basic scientific theory right now. Fusion, however, because it is produced at what'll produce to produce fusion reaction is a shitload of heat. You attach hydrogen, sometimes even what's called heavy water, around the uranium, the initial chunks of uranium that form the first explosion, creating a fission reaction, which in turn triggers a fusion reaction and a bomb. Now, your conventional nuclear bomb then, after that, has a whole bunch of more uranium around it, and that fusion then sets off more fission reactions.
Mm-hmm.
However, a neutron bomb ends with doesn't have that final basically layer of fission reactions. Instead of being fission, fusion, fission, it's just simply fission, fusion. And some of the fission that occurs, because, it's not like it all neat, like every single hydrogen atom forms suddenly into helium, but a hydrogen atom is simply a proton with an orbiting electron. And sometimes you get, in part of that reaction, some of it just is a neutron is nothing more than a proton with an electron attached.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you just get a neutron out of that, so you get a huge burst of neutrons. Now, even if Douglas's science of this barrage of neutrons can create prions in the brain, et cetera, there's one little big hole in this, and that's that these fusion reactions also release a shitload of gamma rays. It's because they're just rays and not particles like neutrons. They travel a hell of a lot faster, and those gamma rays are going to fry you before you get a chance to be turned into a zombie.
Right.
But again, that's the kind of thing where you can see where Douglas could have made an honest mistake, in that. Moon, on the other hand, goes into not only La La Land, but very deceptive shit, and I'm going to explain that. Now, time travel is really the stuff of science fiction, as far as science we know. The whole concept of the possibility comes from Einstein's theory of relativity.
Mm-hmm.
And what has to be known about the theory of relativity is that Einstein himself wasn't particularly happy with it.
Right.
Now, there are some parts of it that are now considered true, like Einstein was dead on.
Mm-hmm.
There were other parts of it that Einstein himself was not so sure of.
Mm-hmm.
And however, the scientific community latched onto it like dogma.
Right.
And that's what now everyone's probably seen the equation E equals mc squared. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
E stands for energy, M for mass, C for constant. Constant being, constant being the speed of light.
Right.
Now, to some extent, what has been, shown to be true time and time again is that there is a relationship between energy and matter, and that in fact, matter is, you might say, energy in a very slow form.
Mm-hmm.
What Einstein, and Einstein, was the first person to really put down a theory about, how that could be. But he was very unsure about the mechanics and his thoughts on the mechanics being correct.
Right.
What he tried to do was, of course, the C standing for constant, indicating the speed of light.
Mm-hmm.
What he felt was that light being light,
Mm-hmm.
if you could ride a beam of light, would it still be light?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, would then time slow down if you could do that?
Mm-hmm.
Which is an interesting theory, but if the speed of light is supposed to be the fastest speed, of course, one big problem with that is, well, what then does a beam of light going in the opposite direction look like?
Mm-hmm.
Does that slow down? you know?
Right. Right.
Um, but what he assumed, and it was what he, or not assumed, but theorized about, which again he was not sure about. And I'd say it isn't true. And there, I can even point out, and will in a little bit, where Einstein later contradicted this idea, was that he felt that space and time had some sort of fabric to them.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the popular term we hear in science fiction, space-time continuum.
Right.
Problem is with that is that there has never been any evidence to show that that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Before then, and I'd say is still likely the case, space and time are not physical realities. They are conceptual realities.
Mm-hmm.
To illustrate that point more, darkness is a conceptual reality, but not a physical reality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can make a light bulb, but not a dark bulb.
Mm-hmm.
Darkness is simply an absence of light. If you
Right.
want to put it in nerdy mathematical terms, it's a function of light.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, space and time, as best we can tell,
Mm-hmm.
are simply absences.
Right.
Space is an absence of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Time is the absence of events.
Right.
If I start, like clapping, or since I'm holding the phone with one hand, I'm just gonna tap my knee here. You can probably hear it. If I
Yes.
create a beat, okay. If we consider when I actually slap my knee as the event, the time is the interval between, the nothingness between each slap. Now, granted,
Yes.
my hand, there's an event, there is a constant event that my hand is constantly moving, but you get the point.
That's right.
There has never been any proof that there is any actual fabric to
Mm-hmm.
space and time. That doesn't mean, because they are conceptual realities, it doesn't mean they aren't things we deal with. Just because darkness is merely a conceptual reality does not make it a good idea to drive without your headlights on at night. Thank you very much. All right. But, so just like we have to keep schedules and things. Okay. So in that sense, time is something we deal with, but does it have substance? No. Um, And Einstein himself at one point even said events don't occur in time, time occurs in events.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, contradicting, his own theory, which, well, is what good scientists are supposed to do. That's why we consider him a genius,
Mm-hmm.
because he kept questioning himself. But when you have a scientific community that is so hell-bent materially, wanting to measure everything, it's small wonder that then they latch on to try and make time and space something material when
Right.
they're not. Okay, and even scientific theories have grown up around this that are complete bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
The most famous one, of course, being dark matter.
Right.
When they tried to take Einstein's theories about time and space,
Mm-hmm.
including that, somehow gravity makes space curve, again, big question mark that Einstein himself was putting a question mark by. Okay, they found that the math did not check out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so rather than question the theory of relativity in and of itself, they assumed that relativity had to be right and said, oh, well, there must be this dark matter in the universe that we can't see and can't detect in any way, but it's got to be there.
Right.
If you take Arthur Conan Doyle through the character of Sherlock Holmes, saying it's impossible to theorize before one has data, lest one start twisting facts to suit theories rather than theories to suit facts, dark matter is the twisting of fact to suit theory
Mm-hmm.
for the purposes of keeping, the grant money flowing at NASA.
Mm-hmm.
So when Moon starts talking, when he initially mentioned time travel, immediately red flag went up. Now that doesn't mean that there was nothing going on at Montauk or some experiment, but calling it time travel sounded to me like a cover story.
Mm-hmm.
But I went on his website, his Time Travel Education Center,
Mm-hmm.
to see what he had to say. Is there some proof that has been discovered about time and space actually having substance? Okay, blah blah blah. Let's be kind of open. I not only got things that didn't actually show any evidence of that, but were just outright deceptive. For example, if you watch part one, after he does his little introduction, he sets up a theoretical, like a thought experiment
Mm-hmm.
of a spaceship with a flashlight attached,
Mm-hmm.
shining a beam. The spaceship is moving at the speed of light. It's got a flashlight attached, sending out, a beam as well. And there is a mirror either attached to the same spaceship or perhaps attached to another spaceship, pacing it, moving at the same speed, the same speed of light, and sets up the points as where the spaceship starts when the beam of light is initially emitted, the point at which the beam of light is initially emitted from the flashlight,
Mm-hmm.
where it strikes, where the spaceship is when it strikes the mirror, and where the mirror is. And he sets up these points as A prime, B, and B prime.
Mm-hmm.
Now, wanting to separate to deal with each line segment separately, which is fine. Okay, he sets up A and A prime being, the spaceship, B and B prime being the flashlight and the mirror. And then, sets them up differently. Like he draws one and then draws the other beside it. Okay, which is, and it's fine to perfectly when you're just trying to illustrate a concept. Just separate those two lines so you have more space to work with and explain stuff. But then he pulls a little visual sleight of hand and tries to say, oh, but then we can, then this forms, because we have these two line segments, we can connect them, and that forms a right triangle. And that's outright bunk, because in that experiment, points A prime, B, and B prime are all in the same fucking line.
Yes.
There is no right triangle. For that matter, unless you consider 3 points along a line to be a triangle of 0, 0, and 180-degree angles, there's no fucking triangle at all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that is the first. I can get into many others. Like then he starts talking about light cones and talking about how 90 degrees is important in the light cone as a representation of past and future, and then sets up a square on a graph saying it's always going to be a square because the speed of light is constant. Okay, but this again, what he's doing is he's taking that square that would just be a graphic representation. A graphic representation is not reality. It's just a fucking graph.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then he's trying to use that to justify 90 degrees as the conic angle going forward and back from any point in space, forming a quote unquote light cone. Okay, it's total bullshit. He's taking a graph and trying to project the graph onto reality. It's in a sense almost anthropomorphic, but it is very clearly a visual verbal sleight of hand that he is pulling. And he continues. I won't get into the rest. It's been a little while since I've seen him anyway. But he does this constantly throughout that, and that's where I said to myself, "Wait a minute, hold the fuck on. Something is very wrong with this because it's not just bad. It's not simply bad science that can be an honest mistake.
Yes. That's right. That's absolutely right.
It's okay. So that was that's what I was telling you. Like I think it was about 2 months ago now, where like the science here ain't good. you know.
Yeah,
But anyone.
definitely, brother Matt. And see, the thing with both of these individuals is number one, they're not using their real names. And Dietrich has a pattern on his show of throwing everyone under the bus, people who have done right by him, and continuously slandering and disrespecting people. And most of them just quietly go away and not associate with him. But you don't tolerate somebody like that because a person like that ruins lives. And whether
Oh yeah.
you're part of a Sufi order or your affiliations are, where this is a part of an evil that you have to defend yourself against. As I mean,
Yep.
people who are not even using their real names, they already have a veil in front of them. So there's no need to take anything serious after that, especially I made a 5-minute video defending my character against this individual, and he goes on a 6-hour rant, and that means I must have touched a nerve. And I had no, on the record, I had no bad interactions with Peter Moon whatsoever, and he joins him, pulling jabs at me. So that just goes to show you that working co-relationship between Patsy and Handler that they share with each other. And it's so unfortunate what they're doing. So many people donate to them, support to them. And I found out this guy, whoever he is, that Douglas Dietrich, that's not his real name. He's a hardcore Satanist and occultist. And he does what he does. He has his listeners and affiliates under a kind of a mind control. So those that sever with him, he goes off the walls, and because that's what a cult leader does, and then he
Yeah.
defames them and slanders them. So I honestly, I'll say it, I was duped into it. I thought this guy was giving good information. For years, I supported him. I purchased his works. I donated to him, but it's just like I got to put this information out there so he does not continue to accumulate more victims and continuously slander people and get away with it. I want people to know who this despicable individual is. And I thank you, Brother Matt, for explaining the things that you have. And look, even with his latest email that Moon has sent out on the so-called Time Travel Education Center, he's telling you who he is and what's he going to do.
Yeah, and he didn't actually mention you by name, but he's gonna. I can. I'll copy and paste the text on a message to you just so you can read it if you want. But he's
Yes.
talking about explaining the dynamics of when people flip. Which I thought was very, very strange. And I can go into a lot more that are contradictions, both in terms of what I observed listening some of Douglas's podcasts, as well as what has now come. Like I said, I didn't listen to the whole damn thing by any stretch, but just various blurbs I heard where he's taking a shit on you that present contradictions with things I heard him say in the past.
Exactly.
Okay, the one of the biggest ones that comes to mind is one of the first ones I remember that something he said fairly early on in one of the first podcasts I listened to between the two of you. I forget whether it was the first one you guys actually did or not. It was just the first one I heard.
All right.
But he said that because of the whole ordeal of being a whistleblower was traumatic, that he said he spent a lot of time, abusing substances to cope.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, in one segment I heard, at some point on that whole, 12-hour bullshit, was him dissing you for always eating ice cream and showing, hey, it's my daily ice cream.
Okay.
Yeah, like ice cream might not be the healthiest shit, but you're not going out there getting sloshed and shooting up or anything, and he's dissing you over fucking ice cream. What the hell? You
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, Now, what supposedly set him off, and
Uh-huh.
also this was, according to, again, clips, and I won't say this the whole thing, but clips, because I don't want to listen to 12 damn hours. Was you talking about how it may be that, the ordeals humanity goes through coming up might eliminate 85% of the Earth's population.
All right.
Now, what's funny to me is I think at some point, I don't know if it was on a podcast we did. If it is, it's in somewhere in our 7 hours, or if it was on a call, or if it was when you and me were talking in person. But I remember you bringing that up, and I saying, well, wait a minute, maybe I sure as hell hope not. It's not etched in stone. It was simply a disagreement, and when you have a simple disagreement, you talk. Whereas he didn't do that with you and just blindsides you
Because
in
he's a
this.
deceiver, and what he does
Yeah,
is this is his favorite technique. He accuses everyone of being an acolyte or an Edomite asset or an Aquino cultist. I mean, there's projection when you really need it, where he's always talking about other everybody under the sun being an Edomite or an agent of chaos. But I always talked about the agents of chaos, so he took that term from me, because when I started using the term agents of chaos, it's right after that he started using it. He had never used that before. He would just use Edomite or cultist. So this guy's a deceiver. He's a liar. He's just some guy from San Francisco who's a psyop, and he's got these different people involved in his life because I mean, shit hangs out together, and they're just doing what they're doing, conning people, deceiving people, making money from people, and the supporters that are brown nosing them today, he's gonna do the same to them tomorrow. It's just inevitable. That's who
oh
he
yeah.
is.
And if it's any consolation to you, I've given money to causes that turned out not to be what they said they were.
Exactly. And I did my own
And people,
investigation into this Choclavina Cave and this Radu guy that Peter's always raving about in Romania. I connected with some sources in Romania who are my authenticated sources, and it's all bullshit. Same with this the Dietrich guy who claims to be with the Presidio. He was in the Marine Corps. He was a mercenary, and all this stuff that he's claiming about being with Aquino and the things that he did. It's all lies. It's all lies and BS. He's just, I mean, you living in a place like San Francisco of all places, and you're begging people for money, right?
Yeah,
Where's the sense in that?
right. Not to mention, you'd figure that if he really was a whistleblower, he'd get the fuck away from where he blew the whistle. I did because I remember him saying he lived in California, but I didn't know San Fran. So I'm like, wouldn't you like get out into the hills at least? You know?
Well, see, the thing is that that entity known as Douglas Duane Dietrich, and it's basically just somebody else behind it, and
Oh yeah,
he's just making money off of it. And I caught him, I nailed him, and I made a 5 minute video, and this guy, I struck his nerve so much he went on a 12-hour rant against me. So goes to show you
well,
that cult leaders have to do damage control.
gotcha. Well, it seemed to me like you're okay. Give me the time frame on this because it seemed to me like he did his huge ass rant. That was like the holy shit for you, and that's when you did the 5 minutes. Or if I get
Yeah.
that backwards.
No, I did it during that broadcast. So his past
Oh, okay,
episode,
God,
which
yeah,
was on Sunday, May 22nd. While I was
right,
listening to these lies against me. I'm like, you know what? This is unacceptable. I'm not just gonna turn the
yeah,
other cheek and let him do this to me like he did to others. So immediately,
yeah,
I made a five minute response, uploaded it, and he knew about it as soon as I uploaded it. That I did it while he was doing that, and then that even set
gotcha,
him off
okay,
even more, as you probably listened to the sound of his voice getting higher.
gotcha, okay. Just wanted to clarify that, but yeah.
Oh, of
Now
course,
the
and
other,
I
the,
encourage everyone to report this individual's channel because he's claiming to be the son of Adolf Hitler and how his mother was
what
from a
happened to that
Japanese.
story he told about his dad being some serviceman who jumped behind that shapeshifter when they were doing like the atomic bomb test.
Yeah, so
Well,
it's all lies and
but no,
that's
no, it
the
wasn't
thing.
him. It wasn't really him. It was Hitler. I mean, what the fuck?
Yeah,
But
that's
the
that's
other
Hitler, this
aspect
guy.
I want to touch on is because he did say some things that were interesting. Okay, like I don't know what his real relationship to Aquino is, or if anything he said about Aquino is true. But the general idea he had um of satanic ritual abuse being the Vietnam War come home was at least an interesting theory. Um, now he in his rant against you started saying things that well somewhat contradicted that,
Exactly.
and it's weird to
He
me.
tells on
Things get
himself.
very weird in the timing because if you'll recall, there was one time where there was some Facebook post you made, and either they were commenting or you had tagged them or something else, and I had wanted to hearing some of the things he said, wanted to touch base and talk about some things. And one thing he had said in I forget it was with you or it was something else, and he only briefly said it, real quick, and didn't give any explanation. But he brought up Alexander Dugan
Hmm.
and um, said that Aquino was one of his makers, basically.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I mean,
Hmm.
certainly the occult angle fit, but he didn't give any sort of paper trail.
Right.
And I remember answering the comment. I don't think I could tag him back. He's got some sign of, like tight setting on his profile where I couldn't tag him, not being on his friend list or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Moon, I could. And I, wrote an inquiry. And I had mentioned this to Wahid and saying, hey, this is, and he's like, well, I wrote to him too about a few things and he never got back to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is to me where it gets kind of weird, is because, here's a guy who's touching on a lot of obscure matters, and you've got two people who try to contact him and say, hey, well, give us more, who also had an interest in those matters totally on their own. And he never responds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was that one thing that I want to say, it was shortly after the first hour in his rant. And I had talked to Wahid about this, like, hey, maybe we should contact this guy. And he's like, well, we need to get him to give a paper trail. I'm like, well, yeah, that's definitely what I was thinking too. And so I kind of basically in that message, which I believe was like just a comment on one of your posts or something like that, they're just
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I'm interested in hearing more on this. Never got anything.
Right.
Yet then he starts going into a little more detail about this in that whole rant.
Mm-hmm.
So the timing on that is really damn strange. Like here you had inquiries about a very specific matter,
Mm-hmm.
connection that nobody else probably cared about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not going to say nobody, but how many people on his channel, knew about this, who came to find out about him through you.
Mm-hmm.
But he never contacts them, but then starts giving more and more supposed information when he's cutting you off.
Well, yeah, all the things that he said about me are all lies. Everything is a lie that he accuses
Well,
me
yeah,
of
I can
in
figure
that
that out. You don't
episode.
have to go into it. Um,
So, and that's so unfortunate because that's what he does. Because as soon as I severed contact with this individual, because whoever associates with him, there's some kind of a dark occult energy associated with this, whoever this being is, with Douglas not even being his real name. And you'll have strange anomalies that'll start taking place. And that's why nobody sticks with him for a long period of time. And after people are gone, he throws them under the bus. It's like a demon that's always there to collect, feed, and he's got somebody affiliated with him and others that are in cahoots with him that are of that same nature, and they are who they are. And believe me, there are so many people that reached out to me, those that know my character, those that have met me in person, and they know that this guy is full of it. And I brought a lot of attention to this abuser on a very big front so people can confront his lies and get him shut down. I'm not some normal person that he had on that he can do that to, and everyone goes away and walks away in the sunset happily. So you need to stop individuals like
yeah.
these.
Oh, definitely. I just find it very weird that here he had both me and Wahid try to contact him. And here's
Uh-huh.
someone and he never tried that with us.
Well, there you go.
Maybe you just thought we would have caught on to him too quick. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of boosting my own ego by thinking that way. There could be other explanations.
You know what else is funny,
But
brother
that's
Matt?
definitely,
You know what else is funny? He accuses that my Sufi Sheikh in Australia is Stephen Outram, while I clearly have stated many times that my Sufi Sheikh is Sheikh Wahid Azal, and I have interviews
yeah.
out there.
I
He
don't
he
even
just,
know
he's
who
just taking
Stephen
stuff out of
Outram
his
is, and I
ass.
haven't heard that part. Yeah. But I thought it really fun because he supposedly tried to give a little bit more of a paper trail in this rant against you.
Yes.
But he contradicted himself because here he was trying to make the accusation that Aquino is one of Dugan's makers.
Yes.
And this is someone who has basically said that the whole SRA thing's kind of started in the U.S. with Aquino, a crazy combat veteran, come home to enact, to keep it going. Yet he tried to credit Aquino with a lot of the downfall of the USSR, claiming that Aquino hooked up with the satanic networks.
Yes.
That were started by Rasputin.
Mm-hmm.
So here he was trying to say that it's kind of initially trying to say it's kind of a new phenomenon, but then he's going all the way back to Rasputin.
Well, see, that's what disinformation
again,
agents do.
Yeah, it's a total contradiction, not to mention the fact that, very few people ever actually espouse being Satanists, and most that do officially claim that about themselves are, most of the time it's just teenage rebellion, stupid shit.
Exactly.
But, as far as Rasputin goes, to kind of align, you can draw parallels between Rasputin and Dugan in terms of their influence on a Russian leader.
Mm-hmm.
Rasputin, for all his, kind of odd ways, was extremely anti-war.
Mm-hmm.
And was constantly trying to keep Tsar Alexander Romanov out of World War I.
Yeah, that's right.
And, Rasputin knew that it was a British trap
Mm-hmm.
to get Russia fighting a now unified Germany. And it's pretty well thought that it was British intel who ultimately had Rasputin whacked.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to look at Dugan and Rasputin as similar as they had influence on a Russian leader, to say that they had similar satanic practices. When one was clearly anti-war and one is constantly trying to devise, proxy wars and covert wars, that's night and day different.
Mm.
So, there's that whole angle, here, me and Wahid, if he genuinely had decent information, we would have loved to hear it. But then supposedly starts giving more of a paper trail that seems really phony when he's dissing you, the guy who can and is the guy who basically put Dietrich on the radar of me and Wahid both.
Exactly. And this guy doesn't have photographic evidence for anything. He claims his son was a woman he purchased off the streets who he had a relation with, and he was banging her, and then the woman had a sex affirmation surgery and became a boy, and then is married to some multi-billionaire mogul in California, and he goes to their estate and they provide him escorts and drugs, and then he's a descendant of Hitler through the Japanese mother who was a royal or something, and she gave him a blowjob and collected his sperm. I mean, where does this guy come out with this stuff? I mean, people with common sense. But see, this guy, he's a dark occultist because his mind control techniques and his silver tongue and his words that he uses are kind of spells the way that he articulates himself, and he pulls people in and he latches onto them. And then when he's done with them, he throws them under the bus. So I want people to be aware of him.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
So yeah, brother Matt, you have any other insight on this charlatan and his science?
I think that's enough for now. I'm sure, because it's the kind of thing, because this guy, I consider myself someone who, when a conversation goes off on a lot of crazy tangents, but this guy does it 10 times as much as I do, which I didn't think was possible. Okay. So I'm sure as I remember various parts of things I might have heard him say, not that I want to go back and listen to too much. I mean, something might occasionally pique my curiosity. Let me go back and listen to that, kind of thing. But um, I don't want to go through his whole spiels again. Okay, I don't want to waste my time on it.
Yeah.
Just to look for stuff. Um, but I'm sure something might, given the fact that I did listen to a lot, I'm sure there's the possibility that something will click in my memory. And, if so, I'll message or call you about it. And if it turns out to be something that we need to go into detail about for a future podcast, then let's have at it.
Oh, definitely. And I think we will just name this just a general conversation, debunking this guy's character. So this is not officially part 8 that I did with brother Matt Douglas. Our part 8 will be in June, inshallah, God willing. And I hope people were able to educate themselves about this individual, and please report his channel so he doesn't continue slandering and lying about people and hiding behind a fake name and identity. Get the word out. And I believe this is the beginning of the end for him, because he most of the time he expects that people walk away that he treats like that. But I think this is the beginning of the end for him, for especially with the type of response that I was able to generate.
Yeah. Well, we do what
So
we got to do. And, when you're attacked, you defend.
yeah, that's it. That's it. So thank you everyone for joining us. And until we have brother Matt Douglas back on for part 8 in June. Nur alaikum.
You're like 'em, bro.